So now we're coming to our today's speaker. And again, it's my great pleasure to welcome Joachim. I know Joachim for a couple of years in many connections, starting with epigenomics, immunology, now single-cell omics Germany and GHGA, and he's a person participating in many activities with his expertise, but also with his connections and his super scientific work he's performing in his group. And we will hear something about that today on swarm learning, from research to medical use of genomic data. I think Joachim is an example where how people can bridge between being a biologist and a basic scientist in experimental fields, going into informatics, and through informatics also entering into new worlds of how to use modern bioinformatics for the generation of new insights in complex data such as single-cell genome data, but also others. Joachim is the founding director of systems medicine at the German Center of Neurodegenerative Diseases, DZNE, and of the single-cell precise platform in Bonn. He is, as I said, a member in many other initiatives, and I'm pretty sure he's a little bit touching on this. So, Joachim, the stage is yours. We are very much looking forward to your presentation, and then I will later take over again in the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Jörn, for the introduction, and also for me having a chance to give a GHGA lecture. It's a pleasure and an honor. And I would like to share with you some of my ideas that came in a very big teamwork over the last 2 years, triggered by the pandemic, in the sense of that we were looking for new solutions. And I would like to bring you to this journey. I'm an MD by training, so the long-term goal is to make patients better, and that's inherited from my studies. Although I have not treated a lot of patients myself, decided to go to science very soon. What's very clear, and this is since a couple of years, there's nothing new to all of you, but not only omics, but we have many other areas in medicine that generate more and more data. The whole imaging field is enormously growing and has enormous data, but also variables. And it's very clear that the next wave of medicine will have to learn that without computation tools, there is no way of doing modern medicine in the future. Otherwise, we just should stop doing all this data gathering. What's also interesting, and I'm just reminding that audience as well, but for medical people even more, is that what people in medicine always do is pattern recognition. Every doctor, every day, with every patient, does pattern recognition, even if he or she would not say that, but that's what medical doctors are doing. And we just have to help them now into data spaces where there is no no human sense that can actually identify those patterns anymore. And I think the two areas is really interconnected. It's any kind of machine learning and parts of that artificial intelligence algorithms that identify these patterns. That's very clear. One other aspect is that we have a couple of things that we have to understand and have to respect. One is, if we really want to bring artificial intelligence to medicine, I think we underestimate the amount of data that we really need. That's very often seen in the imaging field, but I think in genomics we have the same, and we will run into the same issues. At the same time, although a lot of us would like to have everything in one spot, this will never happen. Medicine, by definition, is decentralized. Yeah, and so these are two realities already that are hard to fight. And then the last one is, I'm getting more and more a fan of, although I know it's super difficult and it's sometimes even more difficult, but if we really work with the right people, and this is what I enjoy with in GHGA, with those that give us more insights into law, there are these privacy laws, and I think particularly in Europe, we should really protect them, because there is other developments in other areas in the world which I personally don't see in a European tradition. So going now to machine learning, because I introduced swarm learning, and swarm learning is not an algorithm itself. It is a structure that should change how to use machine learning and AI in medicine, but probably also in other areas. So I give you just a little snapshot for those that are not doing these kind of things every day. What we see in medicine is that big centers have data that they can do some local learning, meaning at their centers. But very often, if you look also at publications, it's basically a single center study, and there's another one and another one. And there was even a very nice metadata analysis of machine learning algorithms in COVID-19, looking at lung radiograms or X-rays. And these single center studies were not really validated very nicely, and very often did not scale to other places. So that's one possibility. In another system showing that the data come from one hospital, we have this enormous firewall around it, which is important to protect the data. But then we have problems. Too small data locally. We have still in many places the my data attitude. Like, I'm an MD, this comes from medicine, because you are protecting your patient's data. That's what you are supposed to do. It's not because you mean, it's just the tradition. And then, of course, comes also my model is the best. And then there is the law now that I cannot share the data. So I think we need to do better, is despite the fact, or because of that, it could be actually something we could export once we know how to do it right. Then, of course, the other option would be then, from a computational point of view, it's the excellent idea to say like, okay, everything is too small, let's put everything somewhere. And this somewhere is then having the right to do everything on the data. And then computational aspects and limitations are solved. And from that perspective, I would completely agree. Yeah. The problem is this really such a wonderful thing for medicine? And here, this is to be debated. I'm not so sure. I don't think so. Because the first question is, of course, where do you put that? And if you don't put it to one place, then it's not central. Because if you have 5 central places, what is the most central one? Or do we have a central place? And so, and then if you ask who should host this whole thing, then we start to have the same questions again. Are we ready to share? Can we agree on shared data usage? Can we actually afford to give data away? Don't forget that we are constantly and every day exploited for our own data. And can we actually sustain that? Because data transfer and storage costs at least doubling when you just put your data from a hospital to a central cloud. A hospital will never destroy the data. So this is a discussion that is very clear. It's duplication and increase of data transfer. Now, the other thing is just for those that are not coming from medicine, the central situation, and I'm putting that very strongly, and we can argue on that later, this is detrimental against medical traditions. Yeah, so you don't share, there's physician-patient privilege. So you would not give away your data. You can give away insights. That's something different. And we learn together, and not somebody centrally will rule the world. The other thing that I would really like to bring to your attention is, because we forget that if we really think about long term, and there's other peoples in other fields that have made the calculations already, is that everything that we do in our computer sciences costs money and energy, and therefore is environmentally relatively important. And when you look at these lines here, it's very clear in the next decade, the biggest increase in energy forecast in usage is actually the data centers. These are the central solutions, and the data transfer. Yeah, so those that actually the production of, these are basically the tools or the instruments that we use. These are not actually, some of them are even decreasing. Yeah? So we have to think about this, and the IT industry is aware of that, and favor more and more to reduce data transfer and make it much less expensive, and not only less expensive but also energy reduction. So the term is green computing, but we're far away from that. And it's very clear that data centers is not the solution concerning sustainability. Now, that's why I'm always saying, like, you know, we have been following for a long time to say, like, here's a technical solution, very nice, and we have to follow that. I would like to start turning this around and say, like, do we accept the favored solutions from the IT industry, which is decentralizations, or do we ask IT and say, like, make the solutions that it fits better to what we have and the structures that we have at the moment in this sector. So think about this, and I'll walk you through some imaginations, and I just sit back for a moment and look at this and think about, you know, is this utopia or is this something we should work on? So imagine for a second, you could leverage all medical data from patients across many partner institutions, but you could also apply to this data AI, and at the same time, you basically retrieve new insights from this data, but in a democratic fashion, meaning we're sharing rights and responsibilities, and not somebody basically uses others as we are exploited by some of the big players in other areas like our private data. Now, the other way we would like to imagine is that we're not only applying AI to a couple of samples, but to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of cases, and not a couple of hundreds, because we know that this whole thing will work much better if we have thousands of cases for learning. And at the same time, we would like to honor medical traditions, so the patient-physician privilege and learning from and with each other. Yeah, so this is how medicine has been trained for thousands of years, and it has been in many places successful. I don't think we should toss that. At the same time, we would like to cope with the data protection laws much easier and develop environmentally sustainable solutions. So less traffic, less data duplications. I would try to, you know, bring a little bit of difference. There is this open science, open data initiative. I like open science a lot. I'm not so sure about open data, because if we could change that to open insights and open access to insights without the sharing of the primary data, we can still win and we can still get all the things that we want for medicine, but I'm not sure whether we really have to share the data all the time now. So there are ways in this direction. One is very much favored across many groups and institutions, which is federated learning, which came into place like 3, 4, 5 years ago, depending on how you count. And there's different flavors to that. We have been discussing that with the IEEE, who is working on federated already. If you look at federated learning in environments that would be suitable to the medical field, all of them still have a central parameter server and one institution or organization that handles basically the whole network. And that, of course, in the wrong hands is again the same as if you would have central. Yeah? You're just outsourcing data storage and you don't have the data traffic anymore, but you still rule the game. And of course, that can be somehow changed. And I'm not saying that this is not a way forward, but we wanted to go even beyond that and said, like, what if we don't have anything central anymore, but we have a technique that allows us to share things amongst each others without the need of that. And of course, the argument for central parameter servers are always security. So if somebody holds hands on the whole system, that one organization has to also make sure that everything is safe, secure. You could argue the opposite. What if this organization is compromised, and then the whole thing has a problem? So could we get around this? And of course, how could you establish that? And that's what I would like to show you in a second, what the concept is. Swarm learning is the idea that it enables privacy-preserving collaborative machine learning by treating all participants equally. Yeah, so this is one of the differences. Here in federated, if it's not peer-to-peer, this is not yet the case, because you have one that takes care of the whole system. So I give you the principles, and then we look for some of the examples that we have established in the meantime. So integration of any private medical data from any data owner worldwide without data sharing. That's a broad claim. Without violating privacy laws, so they have to stay locally. So and the easiest is that we don't share the data, and then it has to be completely decentralized. And I'll walk you through this in a second, how can we actually technically establish that? Is this possible? The concept is shown already here. So you would have nodes, swarm nodes in a swarm learning network, and this could be hospitals, institutions, but it could also be companies, because if you have a contract between them, how people share, and this is all settled beforehand. You can have different kinds of institutions or organizations in such a network learning together. So it certainly goes across legal entities, because the thing that helps to have this working is a blockchain. And this is uniting the edge computing by a blockchain, which is peer-to-peer, but it has all the blockchain technology, and since it's privacy preserving, it's not comparable with a public blockchain. It is, technically speaking, a much faster and therefore also applicable technology for the question that we have in the medical sector. So don't mix it up with blockchain and Bitcoin. Has nothing to do with that. The underlying principles, yes, but the technical realization is completely different. Now, the important point is that if you have this blockchain technology, you don't need the central coordinator anymore, because every swarm network has now the chance to log everything as agreed beforehand, and you can identify everything that goes wrong in this network. And even if one network member, swarm member, would be compromised, the blockchain would realize that very quickly and could, for the time being, exclude that until one can find out why there was a compromising event. So this system is up and running to maintain confidentiality, a trust area, and then privacy preserving mechanisms. Then it looks different because now we have the hospitals again. They're still completely blocked from each other, big firewall around. We're not sharing the data, but we're sharing the insights between the institutions, meaning the calculations, machine learning algorithms would run within the hospital, and the results would then be shared with the others. And I show you how this works in a second. Comes together with insights will be shared. Data are not transferred, not duplicated. Privacy is regulated locally on the hospital level. Of course, the contract between them would also make sure that there is not completely different scales. But if you think about, for example, hospitals in the European Union, you could easily address that based on what we have with GDPR, recognizing local legislation. By that, you of course now increase the data set, because now you can have members that might have not been able to share any data because now they don't have to anymore. We can have them in the swarm, and like this, you increase the base of data that you can use for machine learning. So for us, we think that could become a basis, so the principle for precision medicine, because we are convinced that the data spaces that we're generating will need machine learning and artificial intelligence. And therefore, having systems that can be broadly applied for making new diagnostic tests, but also then applying them to patients is a basis for precision medicine. And of course, here again, since we're not sharing data, we can actually follow medical traditions. So the privilege is established, and we still learn together. So both, and I can tell you, when you talk to people more from clinical research, it becomes very quickly visible to us that they are really looking for these kind of systems. Is much more in their genes, so to say, to do these kind of things. This is the technical layer. So we have this private permission blockchain network. Every node, for example, hospital would get a blockchain, a smart contract, and a ledger. Would have the swarm learning library. This is containerized, the whole system. At each site, this would be installed. It's more or less a software. It can be installed on many different systems. So we don't have any big hardware requirements, despite the fact that it needs, of course, some hardware that also can do machine learning. So it helps if you have some GPUs on a larger workstation, which is the minimum. And we can also run it on HPC, and a network can even have heterogeneous systems. So one node could have a smaller and less powerful system than other ones. The swarm network later on takes care of that. We can dynamically onboard new nodes as long as they follow the rules that have been established by the contract in the network. This also prevents unauthorized access to the node network because you cannot just onboard. The complete swarm has to agree on that. We don't have this central custodian. We have also measures to prevent insider attack from semi-honest or dishonest participants. So somebody who wants to jeopardize the whole system would be identified by the blockchain or the content or the organization of the blockchain. And therefore, we have also a clear reduction of reconstruction attacks in the system. How does this look like? We register once the node has been established. So the legal entities would say, like, we want to build a swarm. We have the contract established. What happens then is that the data will be prepared as before agreed. And then the node is registered and it gets basically, every node gets the model. So the AI model, the algorithm. And then the training starts at each site independently only on the local data for a certain time window that has been decided by the whole swarm beforehand. Once this is done, a result, every site has a result, and this result will then go to a randomly chosen partner within the network. So in this case would be the lower left here. And that would basically, that node would have been instructed beforehand, which was agreed on before, how the data would be merged. It could be different algorithms of merging, and then the merging results would be given to the other centers again. And once they have it, they can actually repeat another training. And in the next round, you see that another randomly chosen partner would do the next round. So there's not a single entity that could collect all these information of the merging. This would be split up by the nodes in a democratic fashion. So this is the theory behind it. And that this works is thanks to some of you, I'm pretty sure some of you are also in the audience. This is a huge undertaking, many people that were important to get this going. And of course, I think also a little bit a pandemic, because we got together much faster than I probably would have seen such a project under normal conditions. We have tried that with blood transcriptomes. People always say, like, you know, why did you do that? You know, that's clinically not used yet and it's difficult. And I have to say, of course, we're doing that for quite some time. It's a very interesting data space for clinical use, and I think it will come up more and more. And it can be super standardized, and many people are actually doing it in a scientific fashion. So we are favoring this data space because you can highly quality control it. And we have data, many thousand data sets from patients with acute leukemia, with tuberculosis, and also collected with COVID-19. And we were also asked to say, like, okay, some of the reviews of our work said, like, this is nice, but this is too good to be true because this data is so rich. Can you do it on something that's not as easy, that's not well, the metadata is not as clear. So we have also done it in the meantime on X-ray images. And the principles actually work similarly well. And I come to the conclusion of that in a minute. I give you a couple of snapshots of what we have already published, because it illustrates really nicely, I think, how this can be applied to other areas as well. So here we had a very nice data set that Steffi, in the lab, very talented PhD student, had collected beforehand. We knew that if you apply machine learning, you can identify patterns that identified with very high robustness leukemias, following up on work of 2 decades of really very good colleagues at different sites worldwide. And that's why we chose and collected them over several years, so that we now had the data sets in hand that we could mimic the swarm learning and simulate that, and simulate also how good it is and whether it's robust to certain biases, etc. The way we did this is, since we had this data set, we were always also trying to understand what is influencing this whole system. So we took, for example, a situation where we took samples as training data, completely independent, of course, of the testing data. We then siloed the data in certain of the samples in one node versus the other node and the third node. So they never switched within one particular simulation case. And then, of course, we mimicked the results of one node versus the swarm node, which, as I demonstrated, would be the comparison. The swarm would, of course, integrate the insights as I depict them, local learning, and then integration, and then further learning, and then testing on a completely different and independent data set. non-overlapping, data are siloed, local models and swarm models are tested against independent data. So we're not testing within the local model, but with a completely unknown test node. And we have a couple of scenarios. I can give you one where we had one node that had a 50-50 between leukemia and non-leukemia. But we also included a node where there was only one case in 100 controls. And of course, we know from machine learning that this is a node that is not really capable of learning. The question was, would this jeopardize the swarm if we have such a node included? And then we took the opposite. You know, this could be a hematology clinic where you have mainly AML and not so much other cases. So here's mainly cases. And then asked, you know, the individual nodes, how do they perform in this diagnostic question versus the swarm? We did several readouts. I give you only for time reasons one, which is here the accuracy. And you can easily see that the swarm node really cannot learn. So this is random here. The test accuracy is close to 0.5, which was expected. There's a nice swarm node here because we know that you can see the signal, although we have used only very few samples from the whole data set, only 8%. And then the swarm node where you have more leukemia, but a lot of samples was just not as good as the swarm node itself, which is always in green. So even the best node was outperformed, despite the fact that we added information from a node that didn't work alone. The reason is very simple. The swarm actually benefits from knowing what doesn't work. Yeah? And this is basically integrated in the results. And we have repeated that in other settings over and over again. The other thing that we did is there it becomes interesting because here I'm talking about a simulation of swarms, and you could even argue swarms of clouds or so, yeah, because you know there will be not, even if people think it's still in the central model of a cloud solution, there is not one cloud in the world. There will be several of these central solutions, and we could even integrate those. And we mimic that here by doing as follows. We had quite some clinical study data, you know, for example, all the ones from Germany, all the ones from France and the rest of the world, and we just put them into a certain node and then asked what happens if, you know, now you have even studies, clinical studies that had been done under partially different conditions, so big bias in the data now between the different nodes. How would the swarm actually deal with that bias that is now in between the nodes? And that was very interesting. You can clearly see, you see the bias now because you have a higher range in the permutations that we did on the test accuracy at each of the sites. But you can also see that the swarm actually benefits again from the larger data set and the knowledge about what works and what doesn't work at the different sites. Now, another one that was for us very interesting is what happens if you change technology, which is in omics, of course, happening over and over again. It's not the only field. If you look at imagers, yeah, NMRs or CTs, these machines also have improvements and they have huge biases. So it's not only our field. In medicine, this will continue to happen. So what about these situations? So we took the first data set, which was done on microarrays, on Affymetrix, a certain type, and then another data set on a different type, and then RNA-seq data. And so now each node had different technologies how to make these transcriptomes. The question again is, what does the swarm do? And what we now know is of course, each technology brings a big bias, and the swarm is extremely robust against these biases. In other words, it does actually neutralize these biases because the integration of all the data focuses on the signals that you can find at each site and reduces those that are site-specific. And that's why we can see this result. What was interesting to us, if you train on RNA-seq data, it's very hard for you to compete with on the test set, which has RNA data, RNA-seq data, microarray data, if there is also samples on microarrays, while this was not exactly similar with the array data. Now that was the leukemia example. I spare you the TB example. Similar directions. We also used more nodes. We also used up to 30 nodes already for leukemia. This is all in the paper. It's a lengthy paper, and we had been asked quite a lot of simulations how robust the system is. But we also wanted to know how deep you can go down with the sample sizes. So of course here we teamed up with many people Jörn's university, Saarbrücken, was part of that, but also Kiel and Cologne and Berlin and Tübingen and Nijmegen and Athens. I can't just name them all because this was extremely nice to see how under this pandemic situation we try to establish something that could maybe lead to a system later on where this goes more on automate. Here it was because a lot of colleagues were really enthusiastic to help to get these data. But this enthusiasm and this should become then the routine later, and I think swarm learning could help us there. So you can see here that we had 8 different centers. You can also see that there are centers with very few or almost no acute COVID-19. Some of them have more or less of COVID patients, many controls. And then you see also that there's quite a difference in the age distribution. For example, you can clearly see that here we had included a children's hospital, and then we have differences in the distribution between male and female, and then also about severity. And of course, we have asked additional questions in the meantime, but here the idea was to simply ask, would we identify based on the blood transcriptome each of the COVID-19 patients? And again, with the swarm, despite the fact that there's huge heterogeneity between the places, which you would expect when you have a pandemic, because some nodes might have been hit earlier than others, how would the swarm now behave if you start learning together? Now, a very simple rule would mean like, learning together, should always work better. Of course, that's like a, life experience, but would that technically be also the case? And the answer is striking. Yes, you can see that again in green, the swarm, if you look carefully, is basically almost always outperforming each of the parameters that we measured against each of the nodes individually. Just look at some of the nodes. We're having here values of lower than 0.5. So these are not only not performing, they're actually sometimes even bringing the opposite of what they're supposed to do. So the nodes themselves are too small, but altogether the information brought from all the nodes in the swarm learning aspect really brings to enormously good performance with rather low numbers of samples overall. Now, Steffi was very interested to see one other thing and said like, okay, what happens now if I take node E1 and ask whether what I as a model developed here could basically look directly into E2. Yeah, so we used against each other, we used the other nodes as readouts. And then also asked, what about the swarm? Yeah, always leaving out the other ones. And you can clearly see that if you go down these lines, there's not a single training node where there is not one example like this one where there is no performance. Here is no performance, here no performance. If you take this node, there's again here no performance, very low. And this node E5 has several times no performance, and the 6 is really bad because in many cases there's no performance on the other data sets, while the swarm has always very high performance. So in essence, we had shown in this first place that this is a very robust, decentralized concept and infrastructure that allows us to use AI algorithms on, of course, here, highly data with high content and high quality, that we could bring people together, although they're sitting in completely different places. So that's why we are going forward with this. We have now established this network, and we're continuing also on long COVID, and want to repeat that then with these data sets that's actually at the moment generated. This framework will be available. It really can go across centers, hospitals, and institutions. Of course, we will start with excellent data. People have always asked you, what is the next? I cannot tell you exactly what the next is, because in the meantime, we have been asked by quite some people. And of course, since we're also at the DCE now, we will also do something outside of the omics field, for example, in neuroimaging here. There's a network at the DCE, and they have questions in neurodegenerative diseases and quite some data across Germany. So we would like to engage there. And I show you some examples in a second. But we're also thinking about, why couldn't we use this system for rare diseases, not in a machine learning setting, but in a lookup setting, using the privacy preserving swarm protective network and connect these sites. This is something I'm in discussion with some of the colleagues from the area already. I would love to do more on that. The good news also for us, and I had no clue about this, that colleagues in Aachen actually saw the paper and then downloaded the software, did not talk to us at all until we actually, Steffi found on bioRxiv what they had done on cancer histopathologies. And so what they had is basically 3 independent cohorts of these histopathology samples, as you have them all over the world in pathology. And then they had a 4th cohort built out of 2, which is the CUSAR and the YCR-BCIP, and did exactly the same like we did with what I showed you before. So they were completely independent and then were connected by the swarm technology. And then the results of the 3 studies was tested on the 4th one. So exactly the same. And of course, what they wrote, and I just push that out here because it's more or less our summary, our joint summary now is, and swarm learning enables to train AI models, and it outperforms locally trained models. So also in the discipline of histopathology, it's on par with centrally trained models. So as long as it's on par with centrally trained models, you don't need the central anymore. These are very efficient with robust performance, even if the data subsets are used for training, as they said. They also basically stated, since they have done it right now only for a certain cancer type, that this is not limited to that. In essence, it could be done now on any kind of histopathology, and that opens up quite a lot of diagnostic opportunities. It overcame in their cases again the same thing, the data transfer, and there was no institution required for controlling the final AI model. We have gone also into other domains, and I'm showing that to the genome community because this is a generalizable model. We had funding in the Network University Medicine Network in the COVID project to build an immunohub where you can store immunological data, but also connect them with the swarm technology. That's what we have established together with Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Commersoft, which is a medium-sized software company here in Bonn. They're doing many other things, but amongst them, we have a nice collaboration with them also on single-cell data. But here they built with us a platform that has now all the following aspects. You can advertise your data, so to the community that would be part of ImmunoHub. You can visualize your data, so you have Jupyter notebooks there. You can securely store the data locally. So we have clients that this is a user interface that could be installed, for example, at the university hospital data integration centers. This is what is planned at the moment. We can use different data types. At the moment, we are orchestrating a meta catalog. So we have one instance where you could basically enter the hub and then see who else is there, who are members of that swarm, what are they offering before you can engage with others to do, for example, a swarm learning experiment, because we have the swarm learning underneath. And that gives us then the possibility to do a couple of things. We can also run R and Python data analysis. The privacy issues are dealt with together with data protection offices. And on a local level, so within one institution, you can even share your data with local colleagues as long as they're following the same laws. So I have a couple of strong data take-home messages, to inspire you to ask questions about this. I think, in medicine particularly, because it's such a traditional field and hard to change because it's running like this since thousands of years, IT solutions should serve the domain and not the other way around. I think central models in the long term will just not work with this particular field. Might be different in other fields, but here I'm not so convinced. It's because of the habits. I think this swarm learning is a solution. It's not a solution for everything. We learned already that there's a couple of limitations we have to work on. But it respects data privacy and is really geared towards really establishing that with technology. It fosters learning from each other, which is a central tradition in medicine. And swarm learning is applicable to any medical data space that has been already addressed in local and central AI models. So whenever you have done that in another domain and you think you need more data, and you know that they're out there, swarm learning might be a way of bringing this together. Yeah, and of course, we are also searching for additional applications. So if you have a network where you have genomics data and you don't want to move them from one place to the other, please contact us. We're very interested to learn more. I have to thank a lot of people. First of all my people in the group. And I'm not reading you all the names, but it's basically everybody was involved over the last 2 years in one or the other aspect of this project, as well as others in COVID. An amazing journey and an amazing group of people. I'm very proud of them and be part of that. But I also would like to thank Hewlett-Packard. We have had a framework agreement, and then we just did science with them, and that was great. And then we have many, many people in the academia. Here is only the leaders, but just think about every name is plus at least 5 others that worked with us, helped us, or we could help them with some questions. A lot of funding, not all, this particular project was actually not funded at all. So HPE and the DCD just did it and started it, and everybody else helped. As sometimes this is the case, writing grants would have taken much too long. We just started and then had also quite some fun during that time. And with that, I'll stop, and I'm very happy to take your questions. I think I'll stop sharing so that we can see each other a little bit.